You know, as January went by and February went by, I kept thinking to myself, when am I going to see that one movie that makes me go, yeah, that was absolutely terrible? The time has come. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well, and thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to click on another one of my videos. And today we're going to be talking about a film I got sent to early, but I didn't get around to until just today from Yellow Veil Pictures, and that film is called Rats. Directed by Carl Fry and Maxwell Nalevansky, this film stars people like Luke Wilcox, Danielle Evon Ploeger, Callie Sykes, Darius Autry, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you guys are a fan of up-to-date reviews like this, early reviews, retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place, and I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thanks so much for stopping by. And today, like I already mentioned, we're talking about Rats, which comes from Yellow Veil Pictures, and to be completely transparent, they sent me over an early screener for this a couple of weeks back, but as you guys know, if you guys have been following this channel, I was traveling overseas, and when I got back, I was catching up on a bunch of other videos and just kind of fell behind on this one, I won't lie. But they sent me out an email saying, hey, are you still planning on doing a review? And I thought to myself, you know what, why not? So I sat down today on my day off to check out Rats. And let's get into what this film is all about, and then we'll get into my thoughts. Rats takes us back to 2007 and focuses on the character of Raphael, played by Luke Wilcox. He ends up finding himself getting arrested after doing some graffiti, ends up getting sent to do community service, and this is where he ends up meeting the love interest of the film, Bernadette, played by Callie Sykes. Amidst all this, though, his mom also told him to go and live with his cousin for a little bit. That is the character of Mateo, played by Darius Autry. And amidst all this, some crazy madness starts to ensue that at the center of it has to do with a police officer known as Officer Williams, played by Danielle Evon Ploeger. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. And that is the base gist of this story. Amidst all this also going on, there is a serial killer out there who's cutting people's hands off, and that is pretty much what this whole movie is. I'm gonna rip the band-aid off here and be completely transparent. If you guys know me and you follow this channel, you'll know that I love discussing film. I love breaking down the various themes and different things I can talk about when it comes down to filmmaking, performance, and all that jazz. And what you have here with Rats is a film that's going for over-the-top shock value and just ridiculousness at every turn, but ultimately offers nothing on a narrative level. If you guys have been following this channel, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of comedy, and I'm a huge fan of over-the-top silly comedies. There's been plenty of films that I've reviewed here on the channel that are just dumb, silly comedies that know what they are and don't really ask much of the audience other than just having fun, likable characters and some fun humor throughout. And so I'm a sucker for those kind of movies. Obviously, humor is subjective. I think it's more subjective than film itself, and so it's always going to hit one person differently than the other. But, you know, I definitely have appreciated plenty of films in the world of films that are off the beaten path, that are doing something different, that are just going for off-the-wall crazy humor or shock value. And that's exactly what you have with Rats. And on one hand, in terms of the positives, I'll say that I think this film has a cast that for the most part understands what movie they're in. You know, they're overacting, they're giving these ridiculous performances, the line delivery is going for just absolutely insane, and everybody's leaning into the tongue-in-cheek nature of what this film is, which is always a good thing. You want the cast to be, you know, in tune with what the tone of the film is. Outside of that, there's also some pretty solid gore effects in here. I wasn't expecting this film to have a bunch of gore effects, but there are some pretty solid practical effects in terms of blood and guts and gore. And outside of that as well, as a longtime metal fan, it was nice to have the soundtrack for this film mostly be a bunch of punk rock or hardcore music or just screamo heavy music in general. It wasn't necessarily music that I listen to, it's not necessarily bands I enjoy personally, but it was nice to hear that stuff in here, as it's not really something that you typically see in a lot of films. With all of that said, this is a film that for me just solely relied on shock value, and while that can work in certain films, it did not work for me here. By the time the movie was coming to the hour mark, I just kept thinking to myself, nothing has really happened. I don't care about these characters. I'm watching this screen pretty much plain-faced the entire time. I'm not really an overly reactionary person, you know, that's part of why I don't do like trailer reactions on the channel. It's part of why I just don't do a lot of reactionary stuff in general. I'm not the kind of person that you could be like, hey, let's watch a movie and I'm going to give you a ton of reactions while we're watching it. Afterwards, I'll have plenty to say. We can discuss it. I might have something to say while we're watching it, but I'm not like overly reactive. So a film like this for me doesn't always get that reaction out of me, because when you have these big shock value moments that in a lot of ways are just like exaggerated potty humor or just big blood effects, I'm just kind of numb to it. And so it's not that I won't have thoughts on it afterwards, but it doesn't do anything for me in the moment. There were a couple of moments here and there that made me chuckle, but for the most part, this is a film that, again, was just going for shock value. There's literally a scene in this film where a character is taking a shit and the camera is the POV inside the toilet watching this practical effect that they built of somebody taking a shit onto the camera. This person then gets up out of this public restroom, leaves without trying to wash their hands, and somebody picks a fight with them because of the fact that they didn't wash their hands. And then the two of them get into a fight, and this character who just took a shit ends up ripping the nose off of the character that they're fighting, only to still lose to that character whose nose they ripped off. And the character who's now missing a nose just kind of walks away like nothing happened, and nobody really reacts to the fact that the room is filled with blood. On one hand, you might be thinking, that sounds so stupid and so ridiculous, I have to see it. It sounds like something up my alley. And I guess I can appreciate that this might be up somebody's alley. Based on Letterboxd, I saw that the scores aren't necessarily terrible right now, though there's under 1,000 people who have logged it still. But I just did not jive with this movie in any way, shape, or form. I didn't really enjoy the tone. I didn't enjoy the vibes. I didn't enjoy the characters. The filmmaking outside of the practical effects is pretty whatever. And it just ultimately left me feeling like, what am I watching? 40 minutes passed. I was like, nothing's happened. An hour in, nothing's happened. And then this movie only clocks in at an hour and 25 with credits. And by the time the movie came to a big bombastic ending where a bunch of characters are just randomly dying, characters you've just seen in the last 3 minutes, characters you don't care about, characters that you didn't care about the entirety of the runtime, it just ultimately left me thinking, why? What was the purpose of this film? What was the driving force behind it? What was the creative vision for this film? It doesn't have a compelling narrative. It doesn't have compelling characters. It doesn't have really funny humor. And it just has shock value. And ultimately, that just doesn't work for me. Based on what I was reading on Letterboxd, though, it seems like there are some people who are enjoying this film. So I will take that into account. But ultimately, for me, this is a film that I think most people should avoid. I think it's one of those films that is just pure shock value, but no substance. And ultimately, a film with no characters or redeeming qualities that you're going to think about beyond the time you watch it. This is the kind of movie that I'm going to get to the end of the year and I'm just going to go like, oh yeah, I saw that movie this year and I plan to never ever see it again. It's not a film I would ever recommend to somebody on a conversational basis, and so on. In turn, it's not a film I can recommend to my audience in any way, shape, or form. But if you're planning on checking this out, or you already checked it out and you enjoyed it, definitely let me know what you enjoyed about it and why I'm wrong, I guess. But for the most part, what I'll say is that, yeah, Rats is one that you should definitely avoid, and I wish I had more to say on it, but I don't. So I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.